Welcome to this meeting of the Health and Wellbeing Board being held on Monday the 26th of June 2023. For those present in the meeting room, if the fire alarm sounds, please leave the building by the nearest exit and proceed to the assembly area in the car park. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and is making a recording. To ensure that recording quality is maintained, please speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum. Please ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. Others are permitted to film, photograph and record our public meetings, providing that it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. If there are any members of the public present who do not wish to be filmed or photographed, please raise your hand now so that any such person filming or photographing may be made aware. Voting will be undertaken by a show of hands in the room, and only committee meeting members present in the room may vote. We have a number of people in attendance as virtual participants. Can I request that they use the raise hand function within the system if they wish to contribute? So, myself, I'm the chairperson. The vice chairperson is Jane Ives. The members of the board are Ross Cook, Anna Davidson, Darryl Freeman, Hayley Allison, Julie Grant, Dr. Mike Hearn, Councillor Jonathan Lester, who is the leader of the council now, Matt Pearce, Councillor Ivan Powell, who is a new portfolio holder for Children's Services, Simon Trickett, Christine Price, Mark Yates and Superintendent Helen Wayne. Ross Cook is the Corporate Director, Economy and Environment for Herefordshire Council. And the others should be listed. They're listed in the papers, or do you want me to read them out? Right, okay. The other officers that we're expecting today are Henry Merrick Muggetroyd, Democratic Services Officer, Matt Pearce, Director of Public Health, Ross Cook, Corporate Director of Economy and Environment, Darryl, Corporate Director of Children and Young People, Marie Gallagher, Integrated Systems Lead, Hayley Doyle, Service Director of All Age Commissioning, and Alfred Rees-Blinos, who is the Democratic Services Support Officer. We have apologies for absence from Anna Davidson, Hilary Hall, Dr. Mike Hearn, Councillor Jonathan Lester, Councillor Ivan Powell, Simon Trickett and Mark Yates.
Can I just come in, Chair, because I think there's an outstanding action. Stephen Brewster represents the voluntary and community sector, and I know that at some point we were going to revisit the Constitution to ensure that that was
that's got to go
updated. So can I just check that
that's got to go to as an item at the next meeting for the committee to then vote and approve. Stephen can join the committee, and then that is formally adopted in the Constitution for Council.
When was that? Sorry, when was that decision taken or suggested?
It's a few months ago now, so I think the Community Partnership nominated Stephen to represent the voluntary and community sector on their behalf. I think there was just an outstanding action that we amend the terms of reference Constitution to reflect that. So I just wanted to check that's still live and we need to make that adjustment.
Have we not had a Health and Wellbeing Board meeting since then?
No, that hasn't been added as an item to an agenda for a Health and Wellbeing Board meeting. For it to be amended to the Constitution, it has to go to full council as well. It hasn't yet done so, I believe.
Well, we've only had the annual general meeting, haven't we?
It's a pending action.
Right, so from this point of view of this meeting, Mr. Brewster's position at this meeting is what?
Mr. Bruce's position is just as in attendance. He's
So he
not.
can't
He's not a
vote.
member of this board as things stand.
You can speak?
You can speak.
Thank you very much.
Just checking. But you don't get a vote.
No.
And I do apologise that this hasn't been resolved before, but with the elections and various things that have gone on, there's been quite a gap between meetings and obviously sorting things out like that. So we'll make sure that is resolved.
Yes.
So we've got a full council before the next Health and Wellbeing Board.
Yes. The next Health and Wellbeing Board's not until September.
Yeah. So
opportunities.
yes, David.
So, Hartley, Director of Strategy for the ICB. Can we also update the NHS membership as well during that process and make sure we capture that? Because there are some people from NHS England who were previously on the board too, for example, who I don't think requires to, and I don't think my name was mentioned on that list as an attendee or a, well, I think we'd agreed locally that Simon and myself would be the two members from the ICB that attend, so we could just make sure we capture that as well.
Yeah, sure. No, you're not on the list. You're not on the list either. No, we can make sure that happens. Yeah. All right. Sorry about that. Right. Okay. So they are the apologies. Do we have any other apologies?
No further apologies, Chair.
Okay. So we now move on to named substitutes. I have here that John Butlin is attending on behalf of Anna Davidson to represent Hereford and Worcester Fire and Rescue Service, but I believe that he is attending remotely, virtually. Is that correct?
Hi, Chair. Yeah, John Butlin here. So I've taken over from Anna Davidson now as the Area Commander, Assistant Director for Response, and I will be at this meeting from now on.
So does that require anything to be done, or is it just changes and?
I will have to get back to you, Chair, on that because there was some confusion over the membership from the fire service. It was we believed it was Anna Davison and that John was attending on her behalf, so let's have to clarify that status. And then that may have to come to a future committee meeting again.
Is there going to be anybody left in here today that can actually vote?
I can vote.
We can. Fine, okay. Thank you and welcome. And also we've got Nisha Sankey here today, who is in attendance in place of Mike Hearn. Is that correct? Right, thank you. So we move on to declarations of interest. Do any members wish to declare any Schedule 1, Schedule 2 or other interest in any agenda item? No? We move on now to the minutes of the meeting of the 27th of April. They're included in the agenda paper at pages 5 to 12 and haven't been notified of any alterations, have we? No. I wasn't at the meeting, so I can't propose them, so I do need a proposer and a seconder.
I think I was here, so I'll propose.
Second. Okay, thank you. I move that the minutes have been, so all in favour? Or any against? No. Okay, that's thank you. Any questions from members of the public? No questions from members of the public?
No, Chair.
Right. Questions from councillors? I believe there are no questions from councillors.
Madam Chair, apologies. Kevin Crompton, Independent Chair of both Adult and Children's Safeguarding, says that you'll have to leave at 3 o'clock, just to notify you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, apologies for that, Chair. It's not a day I'm in Hereford, but I'm endeavouring to get the diary sorted so I can be at the meetings in future.
That's fine, thank you very much. We now move on to item 7, which is the Better Care Fund Year-End Report 22-23, which is being presented by Maria Gallagher, or I've got Hayley Doyle.
Hi Chair, yes, it's Hayley. I'll be presenting, but Marie's joined me, and we'll be able to take questions between us at the end, if that's okay with everybody.
That's fine. Before you present the report, I just wanted to mention, although you probably may do in your presentation, that this is only the end of year report for sign off, and that the formal approval of the 22-23 plan will come to the Health and Wellbeing Board in September, as there are still some finance issues to resolve with the Integrated Care Board. Formal approval won't delay anything, and I've been assured that I will be briefed and others will be briefed on the plan well in advance of the September meeting. Okay? So if you'd like to continue.
That's correct. Okay, thanks everybody. So we've circulated the end of year plan for end of year report for 22-23 Better Care Fund, and just to make everybody aware that the National Better Care Fund team actually determined the national reporting requirements on the overall Better Care Fund programme, which for 22-23 was limited to an end of year report return only. The national submission deadline for the year-end report was 23rd of May this year, and this is a mandated deadline, and therefore the report has already been approved by the Director of Community Wellbeing and the Accountable Officer within Herefordshire and Worcestershire ICB, as per delegated responsibilities, and so has already been submitted in accordance with the national deadlines. So today is an opportunity for the board to note the contents of the report and to identify any further actions that are necessary to improve performance. The template that we use for the end of year report and the appendices that you will have seen are a national templates, and they do require us to confirm that the Better Care Fund national conditions continue to be met throughout the duration of the year. And they also require confirmation of actual income and expenditure within the Better Care Fund section of the Section 75 agreements for 22-23. This covers the whole of the Better Care Fund plan and now includes the Adult Social Care Discharge Fund monies as well. And this requires also the system to identify any significant successes and challenges within the financial period 22-23. This year's template also required all local systems across the country to provide details on actual numbers of packages and actual spend in relation to the Adult Social Care Discharge Fund. So you will see that in the documentation that's been circulated. I'm pleased to say that Herefordshire has reported that all the national conditions were met and continued to be met throughout the year, and that included that there was a plan agreed for the Health and Wellbeing Board area that included all elements of mandatory funding under the Section 75 agreements, planned contribution to social care from the NHS minimum contribution agreed in line with BCF policy, an agreement to invest in NHS commissioned out of hospital services, and the plan for improving outcomes for people being discharged from hospital. The reports and the appendices detail the end-of-year performance monitoring against all of the ambitions contained with the Better Care Fund plan. And I just wanted to highlight that there are 3 ambitions that were not on track to meet the planned performance by the end of year, although work does continue. These were avoidable admissions to hospital. The planned performance at year end was 1,106 against a metric of 605. A programme of admission avoidance, including virtual ward and urgent care response programmes, are being implemented currently, and the development of an approach to integrated long-term conditions management is envisaged also to help improve future performance. So officers across the system continue to work on these areas to improve performance. The next ambition that was out of track to meet its planned performance was the discharge to normal place of residence. And this is the percentage of people who are discharged from acute hospitals to their normal place of residence. The metric was set at 91.6%, but this was not met, with data showing a year-end total of 90%, so just out. We are aware that there is a key lack of capacity within Herefordshire's reablement and home care markets, and the ability to discharge patients from acute beds to home in a timely manner has seen some of these patients being transferred to community hospital beds or to discharge to assess beds in the community. This has been necessary in order to release acute bed capacity within the hospital. However, we continue to work across the system to improve this position. There has been further recruitment to vacancies within the Home First team and the reablement service provided by Hoople, and this position has increased at the latter end of 22-23, with Hoople moving towards full recruitment across those service areas. System support was put in place from Wye Valley Trust Hospital at Home Service to help bridge the gap with Home First, and this has enabled a slight increase in number of individuals supported to return to their own home. We did experience during the year some impacts from the winter period and staff absence, including for reasons such as COVID and strep A. But the local authority are also leading on the development of work and increasing the home care capacity within the marketplace to help improve the situation, and recently gave presentation to 1H on the work that is going on around increasing home care capacity. The other area where we were not on track to meet the planned ambition was the effectiveness of reablement. So this is the proportion of older people still at home 91 days after discharge from hospital into reablement or rehabilitation services. And the metrics at end of year point do show that Herefordshire didn't meet this target, with a figure of 70.8% against a target of 80%. As you're probably aware, the CQC registered reablement service was transferred from Herefordshire Council to Hoople in June 22, and there were some reporting issues experienced due to staff changes at this time. This has impacted on some of the data collection, but these have now been addressed. Reporting has improved in the remaining quarters of 22-23, and with the percentage of individuals remaining at home 91 days after leaving the service averaging around 78% for the latter quarters. The issues in the recording in Q1 specifically have impacted on the overall year percentage, so there are some nuances around the accuracy of data which have been ironed out. But we also know that the reablement service are experiencing an increase in the complexity and acuity of patients being taken on by the service. So this also has an impact on the results in this area. We are continuing as a local authority and across the system to work with Hoople to improve the position. And as I've already mentioned, the recruitment to the reablement team has improved over the last few months. Overall, the Better Care Fund pools represent a very significant investment in core services, and there are a number of areas where by end of year we continue as a system to be successful, reaching planned ambitions and improving outcomes for people who receive services. Whilst we're still on a journey to meet the planned ambition for reablement, as a system, we do consider the Better Care Fund approach as a significant success in helping increase community teams to support council reablement teams and improve outcomes for people. Teams are continuing to work together across the system to provide a joint approach, with the outcome being improved flow within the reablement team, which in turn supports better outcomes by maximising reablement capacity. And there have been recent workshops across the system to look at the discharge to assess pathway, how we continue to promote those outcomes for people, and review the D2A process to ensure the best outcomes and maximise flow to support the system as a whole. And we've recently established a discharge to assess board, which will be meeting for the first time later this month. We also consider it to be a strong success that we have a really good system approach with the development of the One Herefordshire Forum and all partners meeting together to provide governance, learning and leadership on a weekly basis, with key items being discussed at this meeting for that leadership, governance and challenge across the system. Whilst we are making significant progress across all parts of the Better Care Fund projects, we do recognise that there's still a significant remaining challenge around capacity in the market for a number of service areas. For Herefordshire, we have a particular challenge across our rural communities where the sourcing of care at home is particularly difficult. So this is domiciliary care services. The local authority are leading on a piece of work to look at all aspects of how we provide and create more capacity within the marketplace to increase the range of domiciliary care offered, particularly in our rural areas. And this has included additional commissioning activity, working with system partners, and we're just embarking on an approach to look at new models of care, but it's a significant challenge remaining for the end of year position. Currently across the system, as you've mentioned, Chair, we are working on the Better Care Fund plan, which will cover the period 23 to 25. The plan is currently being drafted and with key meetings taking place later this week to progress activity on the draft. There will be a national deadline for submission, and then we will be presenting this plan for 23 to 25 at the Health and Wellbeing Board on the 25th of September. I hope that's covered a good summary of the end of year position, but happy to take any questions, Chair, if there are any.
Does anybody have any questions? Jane?
Not really questions, Hayley, but I sort of just wanted to sort of add a few things, and thank you. I thought that was a really good overview and summary of where we have, and I guess really in a sense our Achilles heel in this system is around home care capacity, and that sort of backs up into sort of all of our other services. But I guess where we are now, I would sort of summarise as, yes, we meet the national conditions of the plan, but we are currently poor, and that's not a criticism of anybody, but we are currently poor at making the most difference to people from the resources that we invest and for value for money from those resources. And a lot of that is related right back to domiciliary care and the problems that we've got there. Really positively, and I think you alluded to, but didn't quite say, because I think it is in the plan that's going to come back, is that we are planning a very significant change in Herefordshire to the way that we manage the Better Care Fund. And I don't know if we're going to be the first nationally, but I think we're certainly going to be one of the first nationally, that our place level system, so the One Herefordshire Partnership, which we're going to come on to talk to later, taking responsibility for broadly the planning and the delivery of the BCF on behalf of the Commission. So operationally, that being based in Herefordshire. Because I guess my reflection on the BCF, sort of in a sense, having been on the periphery of it for a number of years, is that it's something that's set as a plan and then it's reviewed once a year. And what we're planning to do is to have a much tighter grip on what we're delivering and that we're planning. And we have, and I'll come on a little bit to talk about this later, but we have something called the Integrated Care Executives, where we're hoping that that's going to be the vehicle that between us as public sector partners, we'll hold ourselves to account for delivery. And that's really quite a significant change and quite a significant opportunity for us. This is the end of the old year in the way this has been delivered for a long time, and the plan that we are developing will be a very significant change, and one I'd say personally I'm really excited about, because I think we can make a really big difference to the people that we serve.
Anybody else? I've got just a couple of questions really, and I apologise, but as this is my first meeting, some of this would have probably been gone over before, but I just don't know the answers. So, why was a decision taken to transfer from Herefordshire Council to Hoople the enablement service.
That was a decision that was taken before I joined Herefordshire Chair, so I'm not sure of the decision around that. I don't know if anybody else in the room is, but I could certainly find out and get you the answer to that question if we can't answer it today.
I'd be grateful.
Yeah.
Be useful to know why, and whether they were sort of ready, trained, and able to take that on board when they did, because it doesn't appear from the report that they perhaps were. And the other thing was you talk in here, you cover a section under point 18 regarding talk community, and the fact that obviously that has made a significant improvement for a lot of people across the county. The issue, I suppose the biggest problem I see with talk community is it's mainly a requirement for the individual to go to them, because it tends to be building based, but there are a significant number of people who can't actually get to the building due to either no public transport or the inability, even if there was public transport, to actually be able to use that public transport. And whether we have any thoughts going forward as a board, how we deal with that. And I would perhaps like to propose, when you talk about rural communities and ancillary care, etc., I'd like to propose that perhaps we have a workshop on rural health and how we see ourselves as a rural county with, even if you exclude the market towns, 2/5 of our population living in quite rural circumstances, and the belief that people that live in rural areas are wealthy, etc., etc., is definitely not the case. Many are farm workers living in very poor conditions, and I just would like to do some work around how we tackle the issues of health and access to talk community facilities in Herefordshire for that very important portion of the population. Thanks. So I'd like that as a recommendation. Yes, and if someone could find out for me that hoople and why we took that decision, whether it was a decision on financial grounds or because we thought it was best for the people of West Frost in the long term. Other than that, I don't have any other questions. So the recommendation is that the Better Care Fund 22-23 year end template Appendix 1 as submitted to NHS England be reviewed, and that the board determine any further actions necessary to improve future performance. I don't think we want to make any amendments to the template, and therefore do I have a proposer and a seconder that we accept the report as it is and the template? Yeah, those. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you. We now move. Thank you very much, both of you. We now move on to item 8, which is the Children's Services Improvement Plan, which was presented by Darryl Freeman. Again.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
And can I also introduce Gail Hancock, who's joined us on camera. Gail's the Service Director for Improvement Children's Services, and will or may join in depending on the questions that might arise. You'll be pleased to know that I'll keep the intro very brief. I'll assume you've read all 89 pages of the update that we provided for the Improvement Board. and just very briefly talk you through a couple of the main points. So the journey for children's services is well known, and the improvement plan, this particular version of the improvement plan, follows the inspection by Ofsted last summer, where children's services in Herefordshire were rated as inadequate. What followed then was a statutory direction and the appointment of a children's commissioner. The improvement plan that you see, together with its progress update, was agreed by Children's Scrutiny and Cabinet in December last year and submitted to Ofsted. Progress against the improvement plan is primarily monitored by the improvement board. There's no governance role as such for the Health and Wellbeing Board, but of course some of the elements of the improvement plan have connections to the wider Health and Wellbeing Board agenda. The improvement board meets 6 weekly, and we provide an update, and they're also thematic reviews, so looking at perhaps health or looked after children or others. Progress is also monitored by Ofsted themselves, and Ofsted have commenced a programme of monitoring visits, the first of which was in March this year, and the report of which, feedback report, was published a couple of weeks ago by us and taken to Cabinet last week. I think of note, in that first monitoring visit, the focus was on the front door, the multi-agency response to risk. We had very favourable feedback from Ofsted about the progress that's been made since last summer with regard to the multi-agency response and the multi-agency safeguarding hub, exploitation and response to missing. If you remember last summer, there were significant concerns about the multi-agency response to risk, and prompt action was taken across the partnership. I'm very pleased by the feedback that we received. Also within the same report, there's a reminder that there's still an awful lot more to do to improve the quality or the consistency of the quality of our practice, particularly the quality of assessments in that particular visit. Ofsted will be back this week. They're back on Wednesday and Thursday this week, which we're preparing for at the moment, and the focus will be on child in need and child protection. So that will be a kind of a regular pattern for us for the next couple of years. Children's Services has been in decline for many years, so improvement to a standard of good or more isn't going to happen overnight or even within 6 months. We've been very clear about that. This will be a 2 or 3 year improvement plan activity. And a summary of the activity within the plan produced for the improvement board. As you'll see, the general direction of travel continues to be positive. The vast majority of our activity is on track. We're just now starting to measure separately the impact of the activity. So a lot of what we're doing is changing systems and processes, including IT systems, multi-agency referrals and the like. And it takes a while to see the impact of that and the difference it makes for children and young people. So what Gail and her team have been able to do in this latest version of the progress update is start to provide some impact measures and or to build them in for the future. I think if I was going to highlight a single greatest challenge for us, it remains recruitment. To recruit experienced social workers nationally is a challenge. In Herefordshire, it's a particular challenge at the moment. We have a competitive offer, but that's not quite enough at the moment. We're in the process of revising that. And some of the challenge for recruitment is reflected in some of the other partner agencies sat around the table. I will pause there, I think, and invite questions.
Anybody have any questions?
Daryl, how much do you think the current rating of the service is inadequate is impacting on your ability to recruit?
I would say the two are inextricably linked. It's the same for the local authorities that either have been or are inadequate. Some people like and look forward to the opportunity to work within an inadequate local authority and to do something and change it. A lot of my team would fall into that category, I would suspect. But equally, it's not necessarily an attractive option if you're a social worker or other practitioner. So the competitiveness of our offer, quality of supervision, stability of leadership and management will all make a difference there, and that's what we're very much focused on.
Anything else?
Yeah, thanks, Hal. I guess we just need to understand that links with the new health and wellbeing strategy that we've just published in the Best Start in Life. So I think there's a real opportunity here to bring together a lot of the prevention, early intervention work through the new Children and Young People Partnership, or we established Children and Young People Partnership, and that was part of that. So I think it's just understanding as well that role can play, and hopefully the emphasis of best starting life being a priority, that we can really kind of focus really upstream and help support this agenda. So not just firefighting all the time. So it's just really to flag the opportunity in the comment.
I had a couple of questions really. The foster carer recruitment that you campaign. I recognise that that you have a regular dialogue with foster carers, but sometimes foster carers leave as local authority foster carers and become agency foster carers. Do you interview them when they make that change to find out whether it is purely a financial reason or whether there are other reasons as to why they do that?
Well, first to say that the direction of travel is both ways. Also, we have agency foster carers come and join us in the local authority as well. But yes, we do exit interviews and speak to our foster carers about why they might move. We don't, to be honest, we don't see a lot of movement in that. We've got a largely stable set of foster carers. We've got some amazing foster carers in Herefordshire, and we're always looking for more. So again, lots of people think about becoming foster carers, never quite get as far as asking the question and making the inquiry. So if anybody is interested, we'd be very happy to speak to them. But yes, we do. We're always looking to see what motivates people to either join us as foster carers or indeed to leave.
Another question I wanted to ask was, you talk about health-related priorities and the fact that that not necessarily the health history of the child is up to date or there for people. And I just wondered whether that follows also with the life story books that social workers provide with young people, whether there is a similar lack in that area as well.
So health histories in this, I'll ask Gail to join on this one in a moment. Health histories on this one particularly relates to children who have been in our care and have left care, and obviously sometimes then making sense of your past and your overall identity and history can be quite challenging. So this is about children who are care leavers essentially able to access their health passports and their health histories. But there is absolutely links to life story work as well, and I'll invite Gail to comment.
Thank you, Daryl. I can see why the link has been made, because there is a link, because it involves some direct work with children and young people. So our practice principle would be that life story work should happen very organically during the course of a child's life in our care, rather than being left to a particular age or to the point that they're leaving our care. Children naturally in our care have all sorts of worries and concerns and muddles, and it's our role as a children's care service to help unravel some of that and explain that according to the child's age and understanding. As Daryl's just said, in respect of the care histories, we would expect children to be supported to understand the relevant issues about their health and well-being during the course of their time in our care. But specifically, health histories relate to what a child who's been in our care has when they're leaving our care and becoming a young adult and independent. And it's usual that if families were still in contact with their birth families, being brought up by their mums and dads, then their relevant health histories would be held by their mum and dad, by their family, and would be part of the ongoing family narrative. That's not always the case for young people in care. So we try to go an extra step, if you like, to provide care leavers who are leaving care with a handheld care history. But now in the age of digitalisation, there's all sorts of other apps that can be used, so that it's to make sure that a young adult who has had time in care is never left in any doubt, so that they do know what immunisations they've had. They do know whether when they were a baby, whether they were screened for a particular health concern. it's making sure that they have that information with them and into their adult life that they may not have otherwise. But I think the question, it's a good parallel to draw, because both of these two issues, if tackled well, would naturally involve some direct work between that particular child and young person and their social worker or personal advisor.
Thank you. And my final question is that NEETs appears to be a real issue. I don't know whether it is only in this authority, or I expect it's probably a problem across the country. And certainly in this authority, it's been an issue for us for a long time. And I just wonder how many of our partner agencies offer, or we approach to offer, work experience, apprenticeships, or at least interviews for jobs that come along for our care leavers. Part of my concern, and I'm not saying anything wrong with this, but often when you talk to care leavers, they go to work in care. And there's nothing wrong with, absolutely nothing wrong with working in care, but there are lots of other opportunities out there that are available to them that they perhaps don't have the opportunity to experience. I just wonder, bearing in mind that we work with obviously the health service, voluntary sector, we've got Balfour BT, we've got Hoople, we've got lots of other organisations that we have dealings with, you know, whether we proactively encourage them to offer our young people work experience, or give them the opportunity for apprenticeships, or at least when there's jobs available, give them an interview for a job.
So the NEET is not in education, employment or training. So our figures are comparable to the England average and statistical neighbour. It's an issue nationally. So we're certainly not worse than the majority of other local authorities. The overall figure is skewed by young people, care leavers, for example, who might be parenting themselves or might be unwell, and a whole load of other reasons why they wouldn't be in education, employment or training. So there's always a little bit more to that data. And then there's a group of young people who may just choose not to be in touch with us and not to provide us with the data as well. So it's likely to be an underreport, but unlikely to be a significant underreport in terms of the numbers that we've got, but certainly not out of kilter with the national picture. And we all know, for example, that care leavers are disproportionately represented in mental health services and in prison service and others. So there's a clear disadvantage if you've been in care and are a care leaver. We are having some of those questions with some of our colleagues in a wide range of agencies. We're looking at our contracts and commissioning within the council, so that, for example, some of the big contractors that you mentioned there, we can start that, but we're very early stages. I think it's fair to say that we weren't doing that enough, and it's quite early and conceptual still. We're developing a number of apprenticeships ourselves within the council, not just in the administration and the like, but in a wide range of other opportunities. But also be offering apprenticeships in children's services as well for care leavers, which we just developed at the moment. So early days, there's more that we need to be doing in terms of the conversations with some of our partner agencies, both around the table and at the board and elsewhere.
Thank you. And finally, on page 73, under measures that matter with regards to various items, there's two, number of in-house foster care households and number of placements offered increasing is good, to be confirmed. Proportion of available in-house fostering capacity utilised, to be confirmed. And I wondered if we've got the figures for that.
Unless Gail's got them off the top of her head, I think we probably don't have right now. That's some of the work that we were doing from the June board to develop that measure for the next meeting in July. But right. Unless Gail's got an answer to that one, I suspect we probably don't.
No, I don't, but that's an accurate response, Daryl. The service is developing its reporting through electronic means so that we're able to say the number of placements that we have, and within each of those foster carer homes, how many children can be looked after, and also how many that are, at any point in time, one would expect to have more carers than we offer placements, on the basis that naturally foster carers require some breathing space in between one placement and another, although often because of the demand we don't afford them that breathing space. But yeah, Daryl's response was accurate regarding the July improvement board. We're anticipating those figures to be available in the measures that matter there.
I can just add though, there are, just bear with me 1 second, we've got 155 children that are in our care, placed in our own foster carers, in our own provision, which is a really strong figure. We do, again, nearly 70% of the children in our care are in family placements, and about 50% of the children in our care are in our own provision. Excuse me. So that, generally speaking, again, we perform reasonably well compared to others. But I kind of say again, where I started earlier on, we need more foster carers. So anybody that's interested in becoming a foster carer, or any employers that want to become fostering friendly employers. So Herefordshire Council has recently become a foster friendly employer. So we've got HR policies that support our own staff to become foster carers. And we happily talk with any other employers in Herefordshire who would want to become foster friendly employers.
And my final question really is to do with dental health. Amongst the our looked after children, do we have significant problems with getting dental care for them, bearing in mind that we do within the population of children in Herefordshire?
No, there's a dedicated resource for children in care,
Right.
Much as there is for initial health assessments and review health assessments. So children in care who need to access dental care, well, they all need to access dental care, but if they needed to urgently access dental care, or if a carer was struggling to access dental care, then there's a dedicated provision and a contact for children in care.
That's very good. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Yes, David.
So it's not a question, it's a comment, just following up your suggestion about looking at needs and the role that partners can play. I'll take away an action to speak to NHS colleagues on that, and both the foster friendly employer things, to make sure that we're doing all we can to support partners in that area. Because we've got workforce challenges, as Jane will relate to, and we are very happy to look wherever we can to help some of our workforce challenges, which also gives an opportunity to provide opportunity for people.
The health service has got such a wide variety of jobs, isn't it? Huge variety, massive. So that's very good. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? No? Does anybody want to make any more recommendations than the recommendations that are printed on the papers? No? So we note the progress reported on the Children's Service Improvement Plan and recent feedback from officers for standards in education, children's services and skills, Ofsted, following the first monitoring visit since the inspection in summer 2022. So can I have a proposal and a second for the recommendation?
I was going back.
I'll second. Oh, you'll second it, Matt. Okay. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Okay. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
And thank you. Right, we now move on to One Herefordshire Partnership update, and to provide members of the Health and Wellbeing Board an update on the One Herefordshire Partnership, which will be presented by Jane Ice.
Thank you. Good luck with your inspection next week.
Yes.
That will be very interested. So I think there's a presentation that's going to be shown. There you go. Yeah. You put that in presentation mode. Lovely, perfect. Thank you. Thank you. If you pop onto the next, onto the first slide. Thank you. So there's a couple of people in the room who'll know this back to front and inside out. So due apologies to those people because they'll understand that. But there are others, and particularly you, Carol, where it's really helpful to understand what this is about, where it's come from, what we're trying to do. Because at its, I guess, at its simplest, partners in Herefordshire, so NHS, social care, voluntary sector, all believe that working together will deliver better care, better outcomes, and at lower cost. And so this presentation is about how we're aiming to do that, and how it fits into the legislative changes that came about just around about 12 months ago now with the implementation of integrated care systems. So a bit about what difference have we made, and a bit about what we're planning to do, what we plan to do next. So this slide is just sort of trying to put a sort of a bit of a picture on a page that says, what are we about? At the beginning, right in the middle of it is helping you to help yourself, which is the preventative agenda that we've all absolutely got a commitment to. If we all work together and collaboratively on supporting people to live healthier and happier lives, then we'll make a really significant difference. So next slide. So this slide again, you don't need to get into all of the detail, but it's really where does this happen? So integrated care systems, they came into being 12 months ago, and I think it's fair to say that the legislation is actually pretty permissive on how you do this. It sort of says the 4 things you need. You need an integrated care board, you need to have provider collaboratives, you need an integrated care partnership, and you need to work out how you're going to work at place. But beyond those 4 things, actually how you do that, and particularly how at place you work, and place for us is Herefordshire, it's really pretty permissive and doesn't say we think you ought to do it this way. And so in a way, really, this is the way that we've been interpreting that legislation, and the freedoms and the opportunities that it gives us to work in a really different way. Really the genesis of this way of working came about in COVID, where we all worked in a very, very different way, particularly for that first 6 months or so. And we looked at each other and asked, and we said, actually, this feels like it really works, and it's the way that we want to work in the future. So we've tried to really hardwire that into the way that we work. The other importance to the Health and Wellbeing Board is that in our priorities for the year that we've just started is taking responsibility for the 2 main priorities in the Health and Wellbeing strategy. So as partners, we're saying, actually, we feel ownership of this. This isn't something that the Health and Wellbeing Board's responsibility in a sort of a rather nebulous way, but actually it's very practical. It's about what we do and how we do those things together. And Matt, when he first came into post, sort of did that review of the last Health and Wellbeing strategy and really found that there'd been not a great deal of delivery. It had sort of been a plan that had written and sort of gathered dust, and I think we're all really committed to that not being the case. So the 3 green boxes in the middle are the Health and Wellbeing Board, which is obviously half of the Integrated Care Partnership in a way across the 2 counties. The Community Partnership, which is really important, Christine Price leads that on all of our behalf. And then the One Herefordshire Partnership and how we work together. So next slide. So this slide really is actually how does it work? And again, I don't want to pay too much attention to all of the boxes around this, but the top half is really what I've just talked about in terms of the system. The bottom element of here in the orange boxes is the primary care network. So they're at the bottom of the diagram, but we probably all see them as actually core and central to what we're trying to do. Actually, that partnership working at the primary care network level, serving 40 to 50,000 people with all of our services, trying to work together and wrap around individuals, is very much at the core of what we're trying to do. But there's 3 boxes there: the Integrated Care Executive, the One Herefordshire Partnership, and the Clinical Practitioner Forum. And next slide, please, and I'll tell you a bit about what those do. So the One Herefordshire Partnership. I currently chair that. It's made up of the local authority, and Matt and Hilary attend from local authority. It's made up of the general practice leadership team, and Mike Hearn and Nisha attend from there. Made up of the Health and Care Partnership covering mental health services, And we have representatives from there, and myself and Director of Strategy from Wye Valley Trust. The other member of the board is John Barnes, who has a joint appointment with the ICB. So he's sort of got sort of a leg in both camps in terms of the commissioner responsibility and delivery, but pretty much is sort of we're trying to say actually there's one person who's going to try and hold the ring on all the things that we're trying to deliver together, and Health Watch and Christine Price as a partner as well. So that's our the partners that come together, and we meet weekly. So we try and keep this, as I say, the things that we learned from COVID, we're keeping these things agile and regular and frequent, so that we can make decisions quickly. So the One Heritage Partnership, our responsibility is sort of as our sort of strategic decision maker, translating the sort of all of that national strategy and the health and wellbeing strategy, translating all of those into something practical and pragmatic that we will get on and deliver. So we agree each year a set of priorities that we're going to work on, and we agree the sort of KPIs and objectives that we're going to hold ourselves to account for, and make sure that we've got really good engagement and co-production. So the other really important forum is the Clinical and Practitioner Forum. So that's chaired by Mike Hearn, obviously one of our local GPs, and with a clear responsibility in terms of the GP leadership team. But there's practitioners, so that's doctors from secondary care, nurses, senior therapists, senior pharmacists, social workers are involved in that forum, and really that's about coming up with practical clinical pathway changes that will help support improvement, and will help the partners learn together and sort of coordinate the clinical voice, so that we make sure that we're doing the right thing. So that's the Perfect Clinical Practitioner Forum. Meets once a fortnight, so again very regular. And then we've got this thing called the Integrated Care Executive, where we've got a non-executive director appointed on behalf of all partners, who and then the Integrated Care Executive, we've got again all of those organisations are represented at a senior level, and its responsibility is to hold us to account for the things that we said we're going to deliver. So when I talked about the BCF and the responsibility passing to the One Herefordshire Partnership, we will ask the Integrated Care Executive to really scrutinise how we're investing that money and what difference is it making. Is it making enough difference to the people we serve, and is it good value for money? So there's a range of things which we've given to the Integrated Care Executive and said, please hold us all to account on delivering that. I think in terms of maturity, the One Herefordshire Partnership and the Clinical Practitioner Forum are both pretty mature now. We've got a really established way of working. ICE, Integrated Care Executive, is a little less mature, and we're really expecting that to gain quite a lot of momentum this year. So those are the three bits, and ICE meets monthly because it's less needs to be less agile, meeting so regularly. And then obviously underneath it, we've got the community partnership with an engagement with the public underpinning all of our work. So that's sort of the structure of how it works. So next slide, please. I'm not going to go through all of the detail of this, but what we've tried to do is develop joint appointments between the different organisations that are a sign of real partnership. So Nisha is one of those, so she's got a joint appointment between Wye Valley Trust, where she's responsible for the community teams that work in the PCNs, and he also has a responsibility as Director of Strategy over the PCNs in primary care. So a really important one, pulling those teams together in a functional way that maps what we're trying to do under our strategy. I've already talked about John Barnes, who has that sort of system-wide view, and then we've got a joint appointment at a senior level between the local authority and Wye Valley, again over community teams, and with a responsibility to make sure that the enablement service, now managed by Hoople, actually is an integrated service and works well in the system. So some again real commitment to the partnership by putting our money where our mouth is really, and making some joint appointments. So next slide. I won't go through the detail of this, but really this is when we set out sort of nearly 3 years ago and said this is the way we want to work. We set ourselves a number of principles about the way that we would work, and it's very much about genuine partnership, about phasing the things that we're doing so we gather momentum over time, and that we learn by doing philosophy, and that's very clear across what we do. We try not to spend all of our time on planning and spend more of our time on delivery, and then review and amend as we go along. And that's very much the partnership approach. So next slide, please. So a number of things that we've that I'd say we're sort of proud of, and I'll come to a little bit more detail about these. But say joint appointments we're pretty proud of. Voting with our feet. I mean, attendance and engagement. That's something that happens weekly. Is just a sign that people feel like it's worth coming to. It's making a difference, and we have really good attendance across the board. We have a couple of things we do, something called Transformation Tuesday and something called Safety and Sync, which are just learning forums across the whole system. So Transformation Tuesday, a number of, Daryl's probably been to one of those around children's services. So anyone from the system can say, actually, this is some improvement work that we're doing. And we want to share it with everybody and say, this is the work we've done, this is what we're going to do, this is the help that we need from others. And that it's, all of it is facilitated by those changes we all made in COVID of getting virtual. So we have regularly somewhere between 60 and 80 people turn up to a meeting, which is just about learning about improvement and change that's happening in other services. We've never been able to do that previously. There's an approach to local enhanced services, which we're probably getting a bit too much into the detail, but for GPs, they're part of the way that they're paid is through locally enhanced services. And we've taken responsibility locally for what the priorities are for those locally enhanced services. I would say, and embedding what we're doing around that wider governance, and saying and the very last thing on that page is that memorandum of understanding to devolve responsibility and accountability of the BCF to One Herefordshire. So next slide. So what we do, what we achieve. So this is just a little bit of a, next slide again, please. It's just a bit of a flavour and overview of what we've been doing. So we've integrated our GPs and community integrated response hub, creating a 2-hour response that's got a senior GP as part of that response. So that's helping to stop ambulances bringing particularly frail elderly people to hospital, because we can get an urgent community response. That service is new. It's been going for less than a year, but it's really gathering momentum. We've done quite a lot of work in care homes, and we've reduced again the number of emergency admissions and falls in care homes by those sorts of numbers. And in the PCNs, and I'll probably hand over to Nisha to talk a little bit more about this, but it's about that, as I say, at that primary care network level, 40 to 50,000 people delivering a set of improvements to those people. So I'll just hand over to Nisha to talk a little bit about that.
So we've got 5 primary care networks structured around general practices within those localities, as Jane said, structured around populations of 40 to 50,000. And that forms the base of the network. But what's really important is about all of our partners working together who deliver health and care services to that population in a more integrated way. So general practice forms the foundation of that, because that's their registered list, but they meet regularly with their partner agencies to plan, to identify what the population needs are at that level, and then plan how they're going to work together to respond to that. So as Jane says, one of the key areas of work that they're focused on in recent times is delivering support to residents in care homes, and how we can do that in a more joined up way. And we've still got lots to do in that field, but we've seen some significant benefits both to the workforce and to our residents in terms of that joined up working, and that's a work programme that continues. Equally, we're working really closely with public health colleagues in terms of identifying neighbourhood level in health inequalities, and how again we can organise our services differently to support access where it's needed most, So we're just embarking on a joint venture around outreaching to communities to deliver prevention activities in a much more joined up way. So really exciting opportunities, but it's very much around understanding the needs of the population in that area and then responding to that in a tailored way rather than a one-size-fits-all opportunity. Happy to take any questions on that or to update in more detail at another time.
Super. Thanks, Alicia. So next slide, again, these are just a few examples. I'm not going to go through lots of detail, but things like urgent care. So all partners agreed an approach to urgent care in Herefordshire, which provides a much more integrated out of hospital urgent care service, and there's some procurement that's going to be starting around the ICB about how we do that and get particularly GP out of hours secured in the Herefordshire delivery model. It's not something that we currently got, and we think we can make quite a lot more difference. And a lot of work that was done around ambulance turnaround. So during those winter months, and people remember that response times for ambulances in the country got up to about an hour and a half for Category 2 response in across the country. And in fact, that was the response in Worcestershire. It was 25 minutes less than that in Herefordshire, and that was really the result of an awful lot of partnership work in making sure that we prioritised ambulance turnaround times. Lots of work going on, long-term conditions. I'm not going to go through the detail of that. Next slide, please. Quality improvement and learning. I've talked a bit about that, so again, not going to go through more detail of that. But in terms of financial strategy, so value for money is really important within this as well. So our chief financial officers meet regularly. They've started to look at a set of financial principles that they'll agree amongst themselves. Okay, so how do we understand pathways? What happens to resources as we change pathways? And they're starting to look at how we might manage the money in a slightly different way. And again, BCF then becomes very important within that. And next slide, please. And workforce partnership working. So workforce is our biggest challenge. We talked about that earlier in terms of children's services. So we've really understood this, and there's a number of things that we're doing together. So we've done a lot of work together, supporting people to make that difference that they've made to recruitment. And at the same time, we've improved recruitment for healthcare support workers in Wye Valley Trust as well. A lot of joint work around pharmacy. Recruitment of pharmacists nationally is a really big problem, so we're making the best use of what we've got. We're using our apprenticeship levy. We're gifting that, for example. We've gifted some of that to the hospice because they can't access it on their own, so some of their staff are able to access. So a lot of joint roles and working on what our workforce challenges are. Okay, next slide. So what are we up to this year? So that was really a bit about what we delivered last year. That can be a presentation that can last a whole day. So I very much skimmed the surface, but hopefully it's just giving people a flavour of that. So priorities for the coming year. So if you skip over the next slide and go to the 23, thank you, priorities. So these are the things that we have prioritised to say this is what we're really going to work on this year. So that PCN development, so really driving that through that team of teams that live in the primary care network footprint, how they manage population health, how they manage prevention and personalisation better. So a lot of work on for all of our teams in that. As I say, developing that integrated urgent care approach with GP out of hours procurement and implementing that blueprint that we've all agreed as the right way of managing urgent care. Health and wellbeing strategy priorities. So I brought those out at the beginning. So we said, the One Herefordshire Partnership, the things that we bring to the table. We've said the two priorities that have been set by the Health and Wellbeing Board are things that we commit to our resources and our attention to delivering, supporting Matt, particularly in his leadership role in that. A lot we're still doing around planned care, long-term conditions I've talked about, but we've got this thing called making every referral count. So how do we make sure that patients are referred to the right place at the right time? It sounds like it's easy, but those things are often quite complex. lot more to do on workforce still, and continue to work with our communities through the community paradigm, which if people haven't heard about it yet, they are going to hear quite a lot more about it. And so I'm not going to put a lot of detail into it now, but there's a lot of really quite exciting work in changing the community paradigm. And then some last bit, which is tidying up some of the ways that primary and secondary care work together. So so hopefully that's given people a flavour of what it's about, what it's for, why we work this way, and what we're trying to deliver. So I'm happy to take any questions, but hopefully that was helpful.
Very helpful. Any questions? No? No, I don't have any questions. I thought it was very thorough. Very, extremely thorough.
Yeah, thank you. And I know lots of people in the room are absolutely aware of this. They
are.
They are.
Oh, yes.
Again, not a question, but offering some additional comment really. I've been to several national meetings in my role around the development of place-based partnerships. I think we can genuinely say that Herefordshire stands possibly head and shoulders above a lot of country in terms of the approach it's taken and how it's grasped the opportunity to bring partners together. So the kind of stuff that Jane described there is a really good example, and we have talked, Alan's spoken on a national conference, or on a virtual national conference, about good practice in Herefordshire, and got a lot of questions from people in other parts of the country about how did you do that, what did you do, how did you manage to negotiate and navigate through that route, etc. I think it's just a lot of credit due to all partners around the table and beyond who've worked on this agenda.
And do you think that if it hadn't been for COVID, probably you would still be working the way that you were before?
I think it took the shackles off a lot of people. Really. I mean, we had sort of a bit of a partnership approach before, but it met monthly. It was like swimming through treacle. It was just so hard to get things done. And in COVID, we almost sort of learned actually there's a different and better way of doing things, and we can be much quicker. And some of those principles, that learning by doing principle, is really important, and it's a very fundamental change in the way that we do things.
So in other words, in some respects, I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that we would want another pandemic, but if something happened within Herefordshire in the future, we will be much better prepared to deal with that as a partnership than we would have been 4 years ago.
Absolutely. Oh, and we can confidently say, any of the challenges that have been thrown at us, can you sort out COVID vaccinations for hard to reach people? The response has been effective and rapid to I think any of those challenges. And we've still got an awful lot of challenges to deal with. There's an awful lot of urgent care we need to do with sort of very long waiting lists, but we are together on making sure we're making the most out of what we've got in terms of delivery.
Do you think the people out there in Herefordshire appreciate that that's what you've done, that you've achieved that?
Yeah,
because I mean, it's all very well sitting here talking about it, and the few people that are listening virtually, but does anybody out there in Herefordshire know that you are now better prepared going forward?
So we've not made a big thing of promoting that, but I think the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So Jane described the faster ambulance response times. Yeah. I mean, historically, ambulance response times in Herefordshire were a problem. Rural economy, population spread over a large area. It's going to take longer to get an ambulance to somebody in that kind of geography. To be 25 minutes faster than Worcestershire and better than Herefordshire and better than other parts of the country, I think says a lot about how that's been achieved, because you can only get good ambulance response times by having people who need an ambulance be carried to hospital or treated by the ambulance service being offloaded quickly and getting the crews back out onto the road. Yeah. If you've got ambulances waiting to offload patients into an acute hospital, then they can't respond to calls out in the community. Yeah. So I think credit goes to the team at Wye Valley and the community services and the GPs who support the fast discharge of people through the patient flow process to enable that kind of performance to happen. So will people be aware of that? They're waiting longer for an ambulance than they were before COVID, but they're waiting a lot less longer than an ambulance than some people in other parts of the country are. So it's a difficult one to promote as a positive.
It is, and certainly from listening to people in my own sort of vicinity who talk about the different way that GP practices are operating with regards to appointments, organising appointments, group practices, having one sort of switchboard that triages the things. When they first get to know about it, they're very, very sceptical, very suspicious about it. And then, as time goes on, they actually think, well, actually, this is a much better way. I'm actually getting an appointment if I need it immediately. If I don't need it, I'm waiting a few days, but I understand why. And I think it is about the message getting out there slowly, but it is beginning to get out there that things are improving.
Yeah, and we are very fortunate that there's variation in primary care access across both counties, but we're very fortunate. There was a national study done last year that reported that said Herefordshire and Worcestershire has pretty much the best general practice there is in the country of any of the 42 integrated care systems up and down the country in terms of ability to access it, how good it is at keeping people out of hospital by providing care, etc. The whole series of metrics that we were, top 3 or 4 in all of them, and collectively, when you add them up, was a model of good practice. So we need to maintain that whilst addressing variation for those people who don't have that experience. That best have to bring the level up a whole lot. Now that applies to dental care as well, because we're responsible for dental care, and we are in the process of, or we have. I'm not exactly sure exactly where we are in the process, but making some changes in that area, which will be very visible to the people in Herefordshire shortly. I hope so.
I would say that though, Dave's right. People need to see the difference in their service delivery, and that's the thing that they talk about. Not they deliver it in this particular way. I mean, in a sense, they shouldn't be interested in that. But so it is about delivery and improvement.
Yeah, it is about if you can get an appointment, whether it be a telephone appointment, whether it be a face-to-face appointment, it's whether you get an appointment at the time that you feel is appropriate. And I think people are better educated now about the fact that they do have to understand that not everybody's appointment has to be on that day or that morning. You can wait a couple of days if you've got an ingoing turnaround or something. It's not that urgent, but it's a slow process, but I think we're getting there. Thank you. Does anybody else have any comments? Yes.
Is the preventative agenda part of the conversation? Because you touched on it and it was on a couple of the slides, but it didn't really come out in terms of the work around the preventative work.
I mean, it's very much in the world of the PCNs, because that's really where that difference will be made by teams working at that very local level, working with talk communities, working with the voluntary sector assets they've got in their community, and then health and social care working together on that. So that's where it is. I don't know if you want to talk a bit more about it, Nisha, in terms of
all back links with the strategy, doesn't it? But I think it's probably fair to preface that with the strong commitment there is in Herefordshire to prevention and wellbeing, but also the acknowledgement that the service demands supporting individuals with ill health have taken a significant proportion of our time and capacity and resources. So making that shift is critical for us, but absolutely at every level. So at system level, Herefordshire and Worcestershire, at place level and at network level, there's an absolute commitment to refocusing and ensuring that we've got enough capacity and energy going into the prevention agenda. So at very local level, there is the link to the inequalities plans, as I say, where we're doing some specific activities at the moment around understanding the needs of the population and taking outreach services into those communities to address and support prevention activities in neighbourhoods and at street level, so that it gets to the people that need it the most. We're also embarking on a piece of work at the moment where we're bringing together groups of of our workforce who are more prevention focused, so health and wellbeing coaches who are now more commonplace across our practices, and social prescribers, community development officers, mind link workers, anybody who's supporting individuals. But at the moment it could be a bit disjointed because we're all very much organisationally focused and based, which can lead to unsatisfactory experience for the population. So those teams are now working together to understand their individual processes and systems, and to understand how by working together we can not only improve capacity but we can offer a much more joined up prevention offer, working very closely with talk community colleagues, again through hubs and other opportunities. So that's just a couple of examples of the sorts of things that we're focused on at the moment, very much building on the experience of COVID again, and the vaccination programme that we had and the learning that we had from that in terms of working much more closely with our communities with support of Christine and the Community Partnership, for example, makes a much more effective offer. We're taking the learning from that and applying that to things like health checks, and so delivering health check service in a much better way that is more neighbourhood focused rather than expecting individuals to self-identify and access those services.
Thank you.
Just a short one to add to that. So you remember a couple of weeks ago we had an online session to go through the joint forward plan. I can't remember whether you.
No, I dropped off the mailing list, so I missed that.
Oh, okay. Well, it was agreed at the Integrated Care Board meeting last week. It's the NHS partner, so that includes the ICB, the trusts, primary care, and the actions that we'll take to implement the health and wellbeing strategy and the integrated care strategy, which hopefully you'll be familiar with. We're going to be publishing it next week. But the title, the headline of that joint forward plan is Driving the Shift Upstream to More Prevention. That's the first part of the title. And that will therefore run as a theme for all NHS services that we're looking to deliver. So it is absolutely embedded right at the heart of what we're trying to do across all of our services in primary, secondary and tertiary care. Is there capacity within the system and investment in the preventative agenda as well? Because I think that's always been the problem, is that you're dealing with the here and now and got to deal with this problem, this one. Yeah. Is there headroom to actually think about preventative, and is there going to be investment in preventative work? So that's a challenge for us, without doubt. We're a deficit financial system that faces huge issues, but that deficit will only get worse over the years if we don't tackle this. So whilst we might not be able to say here's a pot of money that we can immediately release, we need to work to a model where we are releasing money to invest in prevention. So that's the kind of work we're doing now. So we're about to embark on some work to develop a medium-term financial strategy to underpin it. So in the short term, it's going to be challenging, but in the long term, that's the ambition, to get to a position where we are moving money from reactive care to preventative care to avoid future demands, 3, 4, 5, 10 years down the line.
Yeah. Matt?
Yeah, just to build on that, I think sometimes we get confused about investment and money, but actually it's just doing things in a different way. I think, we think at making a big contact parent, don't we? That doesn't need investment, assessing people that smoke for inpatients and all these kind of, when we look at these redesigning pathways, I think we just need to look at it in a different light. So people can ask a question here, and it's really difficult, but I think sometimes, like I said, it doesn't always need money. Money's really helpful, isn't it? In the voluntary sector, I get that. It's kind of, there's those everyday opportunities we have to make a difference to people's lives. I think maybe two of them together, I think is really important. So just want to make that point.
No, I think when I was referring to investment, is because time is the hardest resource at the moment. Is finding time to actually sit back and think about it. And I think talking about investment in time to actually think it through properly. Yeah,
and on that aspect, that is definitely the intention in the early years of implementing this. And it's John Barnes actually described it. It's far harder to identify a pot of money, but it's far easier to say to somebody, stop doing that and start doing that. And so it becomes the focus of what people are working on. We can do that quite quickly. And the joint forward plan is going to start with that concept of getting people to focus more of their attention on prevention. We do it all the time. I mean, AF screening in primary care prevents people from having strokes. Reducing maternal smoking at the time of delivery prevents, problems for children and babies when they're born. we're focused on that very much now. So it's not that we don't do prevention, but we want to do more of it, and we want to push more of it as far upstream as we can.
Okay. Any more questions? Right. The recommendation is that the Health and Wellbeing Board considers and notes the presentation and asks the committee whether they will support the recommendation and note the report for approval. Do I have a proposer? Seconder? All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Okay. Okay. We now move on to item 10, which is the joint local health and wellbeing strategy update, and this has been presented by Matt Pearce.
Thank you, Chair. So just a very brief report. The reason for bringing a brief report is, I think, as Jane alluded to earlier, I think from the last health and wellbeing strategy, we needed regularity in terms of the updates, getting a bit of a battle rhythm going into the board so we know what we're doing in terms of delivery of the strategy. So this is just a very, really brief update, as I mentioned, and I'll just highlight some key points. So we know the new strategy was endorsed by the board in April. We're just developing an easy read version of that strategy, so that should hopefully be available by the end of the month. Over the last couple of months or so, between endorsing that strategy and today, we've been working through the governance and delivery of those two core priorities. And obviously one of those is the best start in life. So in terms of that priority, the Children and Young People Partnership will be accountable for the delivery of that and also report into One Herefordshire. That board didn't meet for a couple of years, so it's still kind of coming together, but we held a workshop last week to work that through, and there's ongoing conversation in terms of what they want to focus their attention on. Clearly things like childhood obesity, oral health is coming through as something that's being really important. Trauma-informed practice is being highlighted as really important, and access to NHS services. So work is ongoing with that. There's an early years partnership group that sits below that as a subgroup. So they'll be doing lots of work in terms of what that best start in life might look like as a priority, looking at the data. The governance is also quite critical to that. So Darryl did a bit of an update in terms of the Children Improvement Plan, and there was an agreement at the Children Improvement Board a few weeks ago that actually some of those existing groups will be absorbed within the Children and Young People Partnerships, or help consolidate some of that governance, which is really welcome, and they obviously help deliver the children improvement priority going forward. Mental wellbeing is slightly more complicated. So we have an ICS mental health collaborative at System, and another group that sits below that. In terms of Herefordshire, we currently have two groups that lead on mental wellbeing. One is the Adult Mental Health Partnership, and one is the Children Emotional Health and Wellbeing Partnership Board. I attended the Adult Mental Health Partnership Board at the beginning of June. At the moment, that board has been very much more of an advocacy, sharing best practice and networking. But at that meeting I attended, they were quite keen to be more action orientated and actually develop the delivery plan for adult mental wellbeing. So I think that's really welcome. We're going to have a follow-up workshop with that board on the 6th of July, where we work through that and make sure the terms of reference for that group is fit for purpose. It's including the right people. We really want that group to really drive and coordinate mental health, adult mental health at Herefordshire. I think that's something that's been missing. So we've got the system, not necessarily the place. Equally, the Children Emotional Health and Wellbeing Partnership, that will feed into the Children and Young People Partnership. They're very much focused on the NHS long-term plan, but there's a real appetite to broaden that out into more public health, mental health, some more upstream prevention stuff, which is what David's referring to. So we're making some slow inroads. I think the aim is that we will bring a draft plan to health and wellbeing strategy later this year for both those priorities, and identify resource to support those priorities as well. So we have a plan that we can regularly come back to the board, we can monitor, and obviously One Herefordshire Partnership will have oversight on behalf of the board. On positive news, the Mental Health Collaborative Executive approved some funding for a suicide prevention coordinator last week, so that's really welcome. So we're going to appoint an officer that sits in the public health team, and that will help drive some of that important work around suicide prevention, which is going on. So it's a really key priority for us and the broader mental health work, so that's really positive. We're also looking at an outcomes framework for the two priority areas, so we'll go into too much detail, but very much focused on the logic models, what are the outcomes we want to achieve, what are the indicators that potentially sit below that outcome, and then what are the actions we want to do. So again, we'll be bringing that back to the board. So again, we have a clear outcomes-based dashboard that we can look at and monitor progress over the next few months and essentially years. Last but not least, we've got a launch for the health and wellbeing strategy on the 12th of July, so hopefully you can all attend. We've got 75 people signed up to the launch event. We're going to have to increase capacity to 100. We're going to move it to the racecourse just to ensure there's sufficient capacity. In terms of what we're going to cover, we're going to talk very much about what the new strategy entails. We're going to celebrate some of those past achievements as well. And then we're going to talk about actually how we go about delivering those two priorities. We've got the voluntary sector coming, public sector leaders coming, members. And hopefully that'll be a really good event where we're not just looking at going forward, but celebrating some of the good things that have gone on. So hopefully that'll be a really good event. But that's the only update, I think, for me. So. That's the update for me.
Nice, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah, I think it's really good news to have somebody responsible for the suicide prevention, because I think, I don't know the figures within Herefordshire, but certainly across the country, it's becoming a real issue, particularly amongst young people. And I think to have someone responsible for that specifically is really good news. And the other thing was you've printed at the bottom, got printed here and it comes under the same item, or whether it's the next item of the forward plan. Is that on the next item?
It is, yeah.
Yes, it does. Yeah, so that's the only thing I wanted to say really at the moment, and I'm pleased you've moved to the race course. That's closer to where I live a little bit.
Just one addition, which I didn't put in the report, is as part of a recent restructure I've done, we're looking to appoint a partnerships and strategy officer to support the work of the Health and Wellbeing Board and the wider networking and partnership works with the primary care network. So I'm hoping that behind that capacity and resource, it'll help really drive a lot of this work forward, which I think, no criticism of past events, I think that will help meet the priorities of the board and provide some kind of systematic approach, I think, to how the board is operating and reassure us that we are making a difference.
Anybody got any questions? No? Right, okay. So basically, the recommendation is that the board note the progress to date on the work to deliver the strategy. And do I have a proposal for that? And a second. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Okay. We move on then to item 11, which is the work programme, which is attached on pages 163, 164. Your papers. Obviously, some of this has already happened. And I just wondered, with regards to my recommendation, with regards to the private development session, whether the August one would be too soon.
The rural
Would it be too soon?
I do have another recommendation.
Oh, go on then.
So one of the things we have a statutory duty as a board to do is to update and review the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment.
Okay.
So if the board agrees, I would like to give some time to a workshop. We could do half JSNA, we could do half rural health perhaps, to have a bit of an understanding about what we as a board want out of the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment. Is it fit for purpose? Is it working? Does it do what we want it to do? How may it work in the future, maybe interface with population health management and things like that. So we can certainly do that in.
I mean, I don't mind, it doesn't matter, we could leave it till the November one, it doesn't matter. Depends on how, I mean, I think the joint needs assessment is an important thing to do, so, you know, I'm fine to leave it here.
So perhaps we could review what's possible for the August one. Obviously, it's going to summer, so it's going to be difficult, I think, for board members.
It will be.
We won't get everyone there, but I think it will be good to do one, and maybe we'll see what what we could do in terms of rural health, whether there's enough capacity to clear this. If not, we could push that to November.
Yeah.
I don't know what others think.
I think if you're looking in August, it might be best to look towards the end of August, which is closer to schools going back, perhaps in the beginning. I don't know.
I don't think any date will be good. I think someone might not be there either way, but I think it's good to get that momentum going. It'd be good to have a workshop on the JSNA because of the timelines we're working to.
Aren't we really going to cover that as part of the GSNA anyway, in terms of rural needs assessment? I mean, can it be? Because in a way, it's setting out the how do we understand the health needs of our very rural population and so forth. So there's probably quite a big overlap.
You're probably right. I think
both things.
I guess it's what's the key lines of inquiry we want to get out of rural health, and what are the questions we want answers to. I guess we could probably weave that in as part of the workshop, and then we'll see where we go from there. And perhaps if we need another one, perhaps do that. That's a bit of an initiative.
Yeah, that sounds fine.
Yeah,
that sounds good. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Yep. Okay. We move on then to item 12, which is the date of next meeting, which is the 25th of September at 2 o'clock. Okay with everybody?
Sorry, Chair, can we go back to the previous item?
Yes.
I know the September board looks really busy, but could we add oral health as an update just from our oral health programme board? So just a regular update in terms of what they're up to.
Is there anything on, we can, but I just wonder, is there anything on the September one that could be moved to the December one, which only has one item on at the moment?
No, I'd like to take that one away. I'd love to.
And I just wondered, I mean,
it looks quite busy.
It's just that the important thing for me is that we do every item justice.
Yeah.
And if the meeting goes on later, we might have people that then have to drop out because they can't stay to the end. And then we find that the items at the bottom of the agenda, which may be quite important, just don't have the airing that they should get. And so I'm happy to, I'm absolutely happy to put oral health in, as I've been banging on about it when I was chair of the children's services, which is going back probably 6 years ago when we did a spotlight review on this, and seem to have got nowhere with it at all. But I just wondered if there is anything in there that we could move down just to make room for it that would.
Chair, I could suggest the mental health strategy, mental health collaborative update. If it's specifically about the mental health collaborative update, that could be moved because we'll still be in a process of implementing the changes. So there's a governance process we've got to go through to enable that to happen. In September, that process will be near completion but won't be completed. So
if we move that to December and put your oral health update in to the September meeting.
Yeah, that would work.
Okay, that sounds fine. I just don't want, I don't know what the agendas have been before, but I just don't want so many items on the agenda that we do end up with people having to either nod off to sleep or having to leave early because they've got other commitments. So, and also towards the end of the day, people start to not be quite as bright as they were at the beginning of the day. Well, I do. Anyway. I don't know about the rest of you. Okay then, so the next meeting is 25th September at 2 o'clock. So I'll formally close the meeting and can the live stream be switched off?